Oh my goodness. Well, my name is Adam McMahon. I am the Connections Pastor here at Polaris. If you are new with us today, thank you so much for joining us, doing church with us this morning. If you've been here for 20 years or more, we love you too. Thank you so much for being with us. We are going to continue our summer road trip series today. And I want to just let you in on this. I think I missed telling you this last week. Every sermon in this series is going to take place on or near a road in Scripture. You see what I did there? Pretty cool stuff. Last week we learned about Saul, right? He became Paul. He was on the road to Damascus. God led him to this detour in his life. Remember that, right? How many of you saw so many detour signs last week driving around after that sermon, right? Challenging. But we saw that when we observe and obey the detours that God leads us to in our lives, things can be a little smoother. There could be a better journey for us like there was for Paul. This week we're going to visit a different road. This is the road to Shur, and it's about a woman named Hagar. And so today we are going to talk about being seen, which is why I wore this awesome shirt today. When we are on the road, most of the time, when we're driving, we want to be seen, right? Grady and I, we were headed out to Cedar Point this week. And as we're driving, we see a big group of bikers, some motorcyclists, and they're all wearing these like yellow, neon green, reflective vests. And it caught his attention. He said, "Dad, why are they all wearing that?" And it was easy, right? That's an easy answer. It's because they want to be seen on the road. The road can be a very dangerous place. You don't want to get hurt. You want to be seen. We definitely want to be seen by other people who are sharing the road with us. Kids love to be seen, right? How many of you remember the Mad TV character Stuart? Look what I can do. Watch. No. Thank you. Thank you. Not just a shirt model, I'm also impersonation. But kids love to be seen, man. We were at a basketball camp this week, and the coach was asking some questions and giving out some prizes. And when he would ask, the kids would like reach as high as they could. They'd stretch that arm so high. Maybe some of you here that have served in Polaris Kids have seen that. When they're excited, they know the answer. They want to be seen. Kids want to be seen. When we hurt, when we get hurt, we want to be seen. We don't necessarily want to be watched while we get hurt. We don't want people to see what caused the hurt necessarily. But when we get hurt, sometimes we even need to be seen, like by a doctor, like it's necessary that we are seen. We don't want the embarrassment of being seen, but we need to be seen. Last summer, I had a really cool boot on my foot because I decided at 39 years of age I was going to play some basketball. And I didn't take much. It wasn't really an athletic move, but I tore my Achilles. It was quite embarrassing because nobody was near me. It was really embarrassing because I couldn't get off the floor on my own power. And it was even more embarrassing is that we were playing in the farthest court, and I had to be wheelchaired through 2 other basketball games. They had to stop the game so that they could wheel me through. It was embarrassing. But it would have been detrimental had that injury occurred when I was by myself. It was important that somebody saw me. We need to be seen sometimes. When we went to Costa Rica, we got to hang out with these kids, and one of the closest things to my heart, one of the things that I wanted to leave there was I wanted them to know that we saw them. We see you. In your unfair circumstances and in your unfair conditions, you are seen. We didn't go to see like how bad they had it. We didn't want to embarrass them for where they were at. We wanted to see them, let them know that they are seen, that they're heard, that they matter. We all want to be seen in that way. And so I'm going to take us through a couple stories in Scripture today to clarify for you and for I that no matter where we are on this road in our journey, we are seen. So if you want to follow along in the Bible underneath the seat, you can grab that. We're going to start off in Genesis 16. It's not very far into Scripture that we really get this awesome revelation of who God is, what His character is. It's on page 14, Genesis 16. And as you go there, I'll just kind of start to tell you a little bit about this woman named Hagar. Hagar was a slave. She was the slave of Sarah and Abram. Now, Abram was promised to be the father of many nations. God chose Abram to leave where he was, to go to where God had promised him. Much like you and I on our spiritual journey, God has called us from where we were to where He's taking us. So God makes Abram this promise. Now, Hagar's story of hurt really begins because of some impatience on God's people. They began to get impatient. You see, they didn't want to wait for the promise of being the father and the mother of many nations. And so Sarah gives Abram her slave. She says, maybe you can have children with her. That's some Jerry Springer stuff, dude. Okay? And it went about as well as you think that something like that would go in 2024. Sarah regrets it. Sarah is jealous. Sarah starts feeling a type of way about her barrenness, about her predicament, and so she begins to take it out on Hagar. And she begins to mistreat Hagar because of her defensiveness and her insecurity. And so Hagar runs. She flees. She gets out of the situation. All of us would do the same thing. We would get out of there as fast as we could. And so I want to bring us into the story of Hagar in verse 7. Of Genesis 16, I'll begin reading. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarah, where have you come from, and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress, Sarah, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. Skipping ahead to verse 13, it says, she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. So Hagar is in this very unfair situation. Her life, she's a slave. She's captive. She's not in the best situation. She's on the run, in the desert, in the wilderness, isolated, fleeing, scared. And any of us would be in the same boat. And while God wasn't the one who orchestrated that and made that happen and sent her running, God did meet her where she was. Now this is kind of heavy, okay? And I knew it was going to be heavy, but I didn't feel the heaviness until the first service when I went through this part. So bear with me and hear what I'm saying to you. A sad reality for Hagar and her situation and her hurt is it was God's people who hurt her. It was Abram. The representative God chose to found his nation. He was chosen to be the father of many nations. He was an ambassador for God. And there's a lot to chew on there. But I want you to think about the platform that you and I have as Christians. When people see us, do they see Christ? Based on how you treat them, based on how you act. Because they're surely judging who Jesus is based on his representatives. That's heavy. That's heavy. How about you? Have you ever been hurt by someone who was supposed to be a representative of Jesus? Maybe it was a former church that there was a situation in and it sent you leaving. God forbid there was ever any sort of abuse that occurred. Sadly, that happens. And honestly, it happens because we're a broken people trying to portray a perfect God. And no one will ever live to the level that Jesus did, no matter how hard they strive. Now, this really interesting revelation in this scripture to me was this. The angel of the Lord met Hagar where she was, but he said, go back. Go back to your circumstance. I can't imagine ever being in a situation where somebody has come to me, or I found somebody who has been through such turmoil in their life, that's been so mistreated, and I told them to go back. But God doesn't just send her back empty-handed, like, no, go back to your circumstance. God gives Hagar a promise. And for each of us today, God may not remove you entirely from your circumstance. He may send you back to where you were. But you're not leaving without an eternal promise, a hope for a future that is secure because of Jesus Christ. And he says, go back to your circumstances. It's just wild to me. It's wild to me that you'd have to go back into something like that. And to do it, you'd have to do it with grace. You'd have to do it with forgiveness. I think we're called to offer grace and to forgive those who have hurt us in the past. Why? Because we hurt people. We hurt people. We may not do it intentionally, but we're not perfect. We too are broken representatives for God. And so for us to receive grace and to receive forgiveness, we first must offer it. It's tough. We're never going to see the perfection of Jesus lived out wholly by anyone else. So we must offer grace and forgiveness. Hagar is on the run, isolated, confused, sad, but then she has this interaction with the angel of the Lord. Now, this phrase, angel of the Lord, it comes up throughout the Old Testament, and a lot of people believe that it's the representation of Jesus in the Old Testament. Some people believe that. It's the same angel of the Lord who spoke to Jacob in his dreams. It's the same angel of the Lord that appeared to Moses in a burning bush. It's the Hebrew word malach, which just means a messenger. And so this angel of the Lord shows up in big time moments. And it's in this interaction where Hagar's hurt is healed because she immediately feels seen, understood, advocated for, not alone. So if you're here today and you've experienced some sort of hurt because of someone who was supposed to be representing Jesus, first let me say this: I'm sorry. I apologize because, again, He uses broken people and sometimes we don't get it right. Let's offer grace and forgiveness where we can, but I want you to know today that you are seen. You're seen by a God who offers comfort to the brokenhearted, a God who offers a peace that surpasses all of our understanding, a God that sees you where you are and empathizes with you. Jesus Himself was murdered by these same representatives, these ambassadors for God. He was murdered, so He gets it. He empathizes with you. He knows how you feel. I'm sorry if someone has hurt you today. But please don't let it stop you from having a meaningful and personal friendship with Jesus, the God who sees you. So let's turn the tables for a minute, all right? That was heavy. I get it. It's heavy. We're going to stop picking on God's people here. Sometimes we hurt ourselves. Sometimes we look for people to blame, but oftentimes we hurt ourselves. Sometimes the wounds are self-inflicted. And it's in these moments where we definitely don't want to be seen, right? We don't want to be seen. And that's not just you. That's all of us. It's our default setting from the beginning of time in the garden when Eve took the apple and gave it to Adam and they realized they had sinned and heard God come and they hid. They hid. We're set to hide from that sort of thing. And that's right where the enemy wants you. He wants you to hide from God. He wants you to feel the weight of your shame and your guilt. He wants you to feel those wounds, and He wants you to feel like you're not good enough to go to the Father. On the road, we want to be seen, unless maybe we got a heavy foot. You don't want to be seen then. Unless you hit one of those U-turns on the highways because you passed the Buc-ee's. You got to go. You got to go. I've got plenty of stories about times that I didn't want to be seen on the road that didn't work out in my favor, but we don't have time to go into all of that. But we can agree that on this journey, we would just assume hide from God than to turn to Him and admit our guilt. So let's consider this second story It's a story, it's one of my favorites, of where grace meets the guilty party. And this is in Luke chapter 15. It's on page 1048 if you want to follow along. And as you're going there, Jesus sets the scene. He's doing some teaching. And wouldn't you know it that some of these God ambassadors, they start talking trash, muttering to one another. This Jesus guy, he eats with sinners. He sits with them. He welcomes them as if that's a bad thing. And as he always does, Jesus breaks it down for them in a way they could understand. And in one of his parables, we hear this story about a wayward son. Now, this is someone who did not have an unfair circumstance. He actually had it made. And it wasn't somebody from the church world or that represented God that hurt him. It was choices of his own that he had made in his life where he had inflicted this self-harm. His sin was great. He chose to run, and he found out the hard way that a sinful life can lead to some pain and to some hurt. And so he goes about his life, and like many of us have, we reached our wits' end, we hit our rock bottom, and he realizes the only thing that he can do is go back home. That's the only thing he can do. But just like every one of us here, when we've done something wrong, it's so hard to go back to the people that we've hurt with our decisions. What will I say? How could I possibly say anything to make it right? What in the world could I possibly do to make restoration happen in that relationship? But he had no choice. And so I want to pick up his interaction here in Luke 15 and verse 20. So the son, he got up and went to his father. I love this part. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So they began to celebrate. Some of us wallow around in this self-pity. We feel guilty. We feel ashamed for the hurt that we've caused ourselves and the people around us that have become collateral damage. And like the prodigal son, we've run off. We've been far away from the plans that God has for our lives, and we've just created a huge mess. And there's nothing that we can do or say to fix it. But all it takes is one step in the right direction. And no matter how far you are from home. Did you catch when the prodigal was seen? When did the father see the son? It said, while he was still a long way off. Jesus sees you now. However far away from him you may feel, he sees you. And that might be an intimidating thought because you know who you are, where you've been, what you've done, but he doesn't care about any of that. That doesn't matter to him. He sees you even while you're far off, and he's so filled with compassion that when you take one step in his direction, he takes off and runs toward you. The father embraced and kissed his son before he could even utter a single word or apology. If you're sitting here today and you feel like you're too far gone for God to forgive you, just take one step towards him. And you can make excuses, but he is just so happy to have you home. What was dead is now alive. What was lost is now found. And they began to celebrate. You see, the hurt and the pain that was self-inflicted, the separation, the poor choices, the guilt, the shame, it had robbed them for long enough. The Father saw, and then he ran to embrace his Son. Romans chapter 5, verse 8 says this about the character of our God. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, while we were far off, while we had not chosen a single thing for him, he died for us. Jesus saw your sin, he saw your choices, he saw your character and the hurt and the shame, and he sees you now as you fight to convince yourself to take that next step towards him. He sees everything you've done, everything you're yet to do, and with all of that in mind, he still chose to run from the porch of heaven to embrace a lowly sinner like me. He demonstrated his love by dying for us before we had ever chosen to live for him. There's no sting in what you've done anymore. You can stop wallowing in the pigsty of sin, feeling hurt and feeling far from God. Jesus has come to offer grace to the guilty. He sees us and he chooses us. Okay, last one, because maybe today it's not that bad for you. Maybe nobody's hurt you. You don't feel that far from God. You just don't get it yet. You just don't see what the fuss is about with Jesus. Like you haven't had that Jesus moment yet. But you're here. Does he see me? He does. And I want to share a story of this man named Nathaniel and how he came to become a disciple of Jesus Christ. It's a really quick story. It's in John chapter 1. It's often overlooked, but it's so profound. And it's in John 1, verse 45. It says this: Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Philip's telling Nathanael about Jesus. Nathanael, skeptical. Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? Philip says, "Come and see." So when Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." Then Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that." Before you were ever invited to Polaris Christian Church, Jesus saw you. Before you ever decided to come and see if who Jesus is really makes a difference, Jesus saw you. And like Nathanael, if you believe and you stick around for a little while and keep following him, you too will see greater things than this. God didn't condone what happened to Hagar. He didn't send her running, but he met her where she was. When we are hurt by others, we are seen. We are loved. We are understood. We are met where we are and given a promise of legacy because of God, Jesus, the one who sees. The father didn't kick the prodigal son out for his riotous living. No. The prodigal chose to leave. But the father welcomed him back with open arms. So when we hurt ourselves, we are seen. And yeah, that's a scary thought sometimes because we feel ashamed of what we've done. But we are seen while we are far off and welcomed with a celebratory embrace when we turn to come home. And Jesus, he didn't reveal himself to Nathanael by saying things like, "I'm Jesus, the Son of God, the Messiah, the one you've been looking for." No, he didn't do that. Jesus revealed himself to Nathanael by telling Nathanael who Nathanael was. So even if things are going well in your life, you are seen. And you might not know what you're looking for yet, but if you come and see Jesus, you will realize that he has seen you well before you ever began searching for him. And he knows you on a deep level because he created you with purpose, on purpose. I'll invite the band back up, and I just want to close with this poetic Psalm of David, Psalm 139. It says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me, and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for darkness is as light to you. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." Maybe at our core we know that. We know that Jesus knows us, that he loves us, that he cares for us. But maybe you're not sure today. Maybe you're on the road to sure. Every once in a while we need a good reminder that God sees us and that he's with us all the way. So friends, today, please take this as your reminder that you are seen, you are known, and if you stick around, Jesus will show you far greater things than you've seen before.